Welcome to Heat Checks and Hail Marys. This is Mike Cagley. I tell you what, we finally got our CFP playoff bracket, and the result looks to be a fantastic set of matchups. Will these games be as entertaining as what they look like on paper? Obviously, we don't know that, but each of the four games on the first weekend really is intriguing. Tennessee is going to Ohio State, and to be honest, if things go poorly for the Buckeyes, might they wish they were on the road at Tennessee? And that's a hard thing to believe because that's a crazy stadium to play at and nobody likes playing there. But after the booing that we saw at the end of the Michigan game, if the offense starts having issues or the defense can't stop the run, how are Ohio State fans going to respond? I don't know. That could be pretty touch and go. If Ohio State loses, could this be the end of the Ryan Day era? Stay tuned. Next, we have Clemson at Texas. Dabo started the season against Georgia, and his Clemson Tigers were annihilated in humiliating fashion at the hands of Georgia, 34-3. What a journey he's taken the team on, with everything circling around his refusal to really utilize the transfer portal. It is amazing that he is back in the CFP. And that makes for a great storyline as they go up against the Texas team that last year many thought was the most well rounded team. And this year, many thought was going to be one of the top one or two teams in the country. Didn't quite work out that way for Texas, although having to play Georgia twice can do that to people. And of course, we have Indiana at Notre Dame, a matchup that nobody really expected. It is rarely seen on the field. I believe the last time that Indiana beat Notre Dame was back in 98, 1898. Whether that's truth or myth, I don't know, but it's too good a line to give up. But this is a matchup between two state rivals that we just don't see. Can Kurt Signetti take his team into South Bend and get the upset? They were on the road at Ohio State, and Coach C said that they learned some things that they will utilize in their next big game. The next big game on the road, it's here. We'll see what happens, but boy, it could be a fun evening. And SMU at Penn State. Now, the biggest thing is the SMU Mustangs. How will they react to whiteout conditions? And that may be just whiteout in terms of Penn State fans, or it could be the double whiteout, which would be Penn State fans dressed in white and snow. This could be a very interesting game for the Mustangs as they start to come back into national prominence. The last time they were at this level, you saw Eric Dickerson and Craig James in the backfield for the Pony Express. They also had a ton of big spending billionaires who were helping get the team going. It's just legal nowadays. The CFP did a great job, and it made this season a fantastic season. For all the people who were whining and complaining that the CFP was going to destroy college football, you were so wrong, and there were so many of us who were so right. Let's talk about Hail Mary number one, college football playoff. Let's talk about seeding. I'll tell you what, I do think you need automatic bids for the conference champions, and that can stay as it is right now. But I would throw out the automatic buys. If you're a conference champion, you get ranked. If you happen to be the 32nd team in the country, then you'll be ranked lower and probably be 12th in the CFP. If you're the first ranked team and you're a conference champion, then you'll be the number one ranked team. It's not that hard. The way it's constructed, where you set aside conference champions regardless of their rankings and give them a bye, it really means that the number one team can sometimes have the harder path to making it to the final. This bracket needs to be constructed completely from number one to number 12. The number one team should not have to deal with a number eight, number nine winner that features two teams that are as powerful as Ohio State and Tennessee are. They were both pushed down due to automatic buys, and the team that really gets hurt by it is the number one team. You play the whole season to earn that distinction. Don't give it up because of some weird idea that you're trying to do to make some conference happy. Stick it 1 through 12 and make your landing good. Hail Mary number 2. College football playoff strength of schedule doesn't seem to be fully accounted for at the start of the process when they release the first of those meaningless weekly polls. If a team is highly ranked on a light schedule and there's nothing really talked about on strength of schedule, you end up with those teams inordinately high. And then if they do get involved in a conference championship game, you don't want to penalize them. So now you've got yourself into a bad place. For me, there's two schools of thought on schedule strength. One is if you're in a very tough conference, such as the SEC, which has more highly ranked teams than any other conference, SOS is a very important measurement. And you can very easily say that you want that to be weighted heavily. On the other hand, teams can't control their schedule. So if they win with a weaker schedule, as long as they crush their competition, they should be okay. Now, I actually think both points are true. Due to larger conferences, there's really no silver bullets that can prevent an unbalanced schedule. That can happen within the conference. If one team plays one really good team and another team were to get all four, that's just not fair. And again, there's no way to 100% eliminate that. But I would recommend with the large conferences that they be mandated to play 10 conference games each season. And this would do two things. One is it would minimize the schedule disparity, at least as much as possible within the conference. There's not much you can do if your conference doesn't have as many talented teams overall. But again, we're trying to make the correlation and the ability to compare conferences a little bit better for the committee. And if you have a 10-game schedule, more teams in any given conference will play more games against their peers to get a true line of sight as to how competent these teams are. It would also provide even more high interest content for the conferences to provide to their broadcast partners. 10 weeks of SEC games provides two additional matchups. You give each of those teams two more games, and it gets much more entertaining for the general fan. But you've got to have the strength of schedule component being measured and analyzed and then being held for or against teams. Let's make that happen and let's go to 10 conference games, and we will be in a situation where as viewers and as fans, we have more games to watch on any given weekend that are entertaining and ones that make us want to tune in. Let's make it happen. Hail Mary number 3. Quality wins are variable. I know a lot of people go, what does that mean? They're variable. But in both college football and college basketball, I will stick by that premise. Quality wins are variable in nature. And now let's give you an example. At the start of the year, Illinois fans were super excited by their Fighting Illini beating number 19 Kansas early in the season. Now, that defeat ended up beginning a 5-game losing streak for the Jayhawks and really flushed their season down the toilet. So the victory was looked at as fool's gold by people. And when you look at it, after Kansas went on a 5-game losing streak, it did look like a not very good win. Later on, Kansas got their sea legs. They played 4 ranked teams in a row, lost the first encounter by 2 points, and then won the next 3 games against ranked teams in a row. Now, all of a sudden, the Illini victory looks much better, and this despite Kansas finishing with a 5-7 record. In the end, quality wins are indeed variable. The bottom line is you have to almost wait till the end of the season to judge wins and losses. Now, my first basketball content here. Heat check number one. Coach Collins of the Wildcats of Northwestern had an interesting quote that I saw, and this was after the Wildcats beat the Illini in overtime on Friday night. He talked about his upbringing in the NBA, that his dad was an NBA coach. In the NBA, they play matchups, and in college, it's systems. We just found a matchup that they liked in the game against the Illini, and trust me, they found it. And they kept running the same play because it was being guarded the same way, and they kept getting the same result. And I thought it was very funny because, on one hand, I really felt like pointing out to Coach Collins that you played against a young and inexperienced Illini team in their first Big Ten game and their first Big Ten road game. Now, when you look at the word young, there's people out there who are going to debate me on that. But the fact of the matter is that only one player, Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, has really played on the road for the Big Ten and played in a Big Ten game. Everybody else hasn't done it. So, regardless of how many years of experience you have in Europe, you just haven't had to deal with the Big Ten conference game and how tough that can be. Despite this being a team that's inexperienced in the Big Ten, the way referees call games with the grabbing and pushing and all the things that happen in a Big Ten game that seems like they've been that way since Bobby Knight prowled the sidelines in the 70s. The game was played at a very slow pace, and the physicality certainly made this young Illini team uncomfortable. And despite all of this, your offense scored 56 points in regulation. That really doesn't qualify a coach for being an offensive guru. But to the victors go the spoils of war, and Northwestern won the game. So we'll let that comment go. On the other hand, as I read that comment, I felt like asking Coach Underwood, just how many times in a row will you allow a team to run the same play without changing coverages or substituting players? Because that's the thoughts that were going through my mind as I watched the game. Now, obviously, I'm the odd duck here, but when I saw that quote, that was what I was thinking about from either side of the table. Heat check number two is one that people have heard from me, and it's simply play Morez Johnson more minutes. Morez has been a defensive and rebounding force in his limited minutes early in the Illini basketball season. And I have no problem with giving a guy gradual increases in time so that he can be ready to go by tournament time. And Brad Underwood has been good at doing that. But I would not hesitate to put him on the court more often. And there's a couple ways that I would specifically use Morez. I would try to limit Ivicic's time to around 25 minutes a game. At Northwestern, it was clear he was tired later in the second half. And by playing more as backup center, that will ensure that Tomislav is fresh throughout the game. He's not playing tired. And who knows, you can lower the possibility of injury if he's not playing while being fatigued. This would also give Morez about 15 minutes a game at the center spot. But I would also rotate him with Ben Humrickhouse. He can play the four, and by he, Morez, especially when other teams are going big or rebounding has been an issue. The other thing that could be done at the four position is look at Trey White and have him play there depending upon the opponent and the game situation. Now, this isn't a big deal if Rickhouse is shooting well. And up until the Northwestern game, he was shooting 42% from the 3-point range. But going 1 for 9 makes people say, if you're not rebounding, if you're not playing good defense, and you're 1 from 9 from the 3, maybe someone else could contribute a little more. And that's where I think Morez could pick up additional minutes, and Trey White, who looked like he was playing better at the beginning of the game, would have the opportunity to play there as well. Realize that White and Morez Johnson aren't going to match Big Ben from the arc on a game-by-game basis. That's clear. But on those games where Ben's a little cold, bring in guys who can do other things, including making a difference on defense and on the boards. Maybe that is what gets you over the hump on one of those nights where the Illini aren't shooting. Now, switching back to football, Hail Mary number 3. Has Drew Allar arrived? Penn State quarterback Drew Allar he's been saddled with huge expectations since he arrived at Penn State. In the Big Ten championship game against Oregon, the number 1 team in the country, he played a very strong game against a team that features team speed that even Ohio State can't match. Drew was 20 for 39 for 226 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 54 yards rushing, and a TD on the ground. Now, Allar could not match the play of Dylan Gabriel. But then again, really, nobody's been able to do so all year long. But Drew was able to keep his team in the game, and he kept them focused when they were down 28-10 in the second quarter. Most of the time, a game like that turns in just to another Oregon delivered blowout. Allar was instrumental in making sure that didn't happen, and he is a critical component to the future success of Penn State. Might this game help him when they line up in the CFP against SMU? Stand by. We'll find out. Hail Mary number 4, the Big Ten team tiers. For those of you who have been watching how I've been ranking the Big Ten football teams, I don't think anything changed. I still think Oregon's clearly the number 1 team. I think Ohio State, followed by Penn State and Indiana, are next, and we go on from there. There was nothing that changed the way I thought the Big Ten stacked up, and now it's time to win in bowl season and win in the CFP. And as a special treat tonight, we have Brad Sturdy, my fellow Illini guy and co-host of the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular and Big Sports Radio, our Big Ten show. Brad, there was a ton of stuff happened this weekend, but one of the things that caught my eye is when you texted me and you said you did a rewatch of the Illinois Northwestern game, and it was not as endearing of an experience for you as you anticipated.
Yeah, the interesting thing was the disappointing thing in that rewatch was how many good shots Illinois got that they didn't make. And yet you've got Northwestern taking turnaround fadeaways off 1 foot. They're throwing in hook shots. They're banking in shots from the middle of the lane. And you're thinking in your head, like, how are they throwing these? This is exactly the way you want to play. You want to take threes. You want to get to the rim. Northwestern's doing the exact opposite of everything the analytics say, but somehow being successful. So I think it was disappointing because I don't know that you could have drawn it up better, except for there were some stretches, right? There were some stretches where Illinois took some bad shots. But for 35 minutes of that game, Illinois had better options over and over than Northwestern, and they couldn't pull away. And that's disappointing because this is a game on the road in the Big Ten that would have really helped them. Because I'm telling you right now, these next 3 games look pretty difficult right now. A lot of desperation and then a couple of hot teams.
Let me ask you a question, because Underwood's dealing with a problem that no Illinois coach has ever had to deal with. He has as many as potentially 3 players who could be one and done this year when Illinois never had one before. How does he keep them focused on winning as a team versus trying to show one another up or show the scouts that I can do just as good as what he just did? How does he do that? Because Bill Self never had this problem, Lou Henson never had this problem, and certainly Weber and Gross didn't have it.
We're back to John Calipari, right? Kentucky,
Exactly.
a bunch of one and dones, and that they didn't really fare very well unless they had older veteran guys to maybe help them. You go back to when they won the national title. Obviously, you had a generational talent in Anthony Davis, but you had guys like Darius Miller who were veteran, who were, older guys who could help them when Cal won. So I think that's part of it. I think that what he has to do is figure out that these guys have to play. They're going to get farther. And Bruce Weber did a great job with guys like, he had a top 5 pick in Darren Williams, but he was able to convince them that Darren Williams wasn't a top 5 pick as a freshman. He was a top 50 player, right? So he's able to convince them that winning and playing as a team will show that you are an elite player and you'll get that. And so at the end of the day, you had, whether it's D Brown or Luther Head or James Augustine or Darren Williams, a lot of NBA players. Roger Powell got a cup of coffee as well. So those guys were, none of them except D, really a highly regarded high school player, like a 5-star kid, right? But with these one and dones, you only get them on your campus for 7 months, right? So what they have to do is figure out how they play it. Because I will say, the other night it looked a little bit like, and I don't want to say I don't want to say it's a bad thing because they're young, but it looked a little bit like my turn. Like, you made a play, now it's my turn to make a play, because that's the way we got to do it. And I don't think they had that last year because the guys understood it. They were older and they were more mature. They played through Damask, and everybody was a little frustrated that they were always playing through Damask in the booty ball. And I think there was a lot of frustration from some of the other guys that they felt like they were just standing in the corner or standing here or whatever. There's no question. But they did it. You know why they did it? Because they wanted to keep winning. And so it was about winning. And that's where these guys have to get to. It's, if we're always running high ball screens with KJ and Ivasic, and that lets us win, then that's what we need to do. And if it continually works, he's going to have time when he's out of the game, whatever. We're going to have foul trouble some other times. But if that's what's working, that's what we're going to roll with. And I think those guys have to understand that. But they're young. They're very immature, and they haven't played there. And they're trying to showcase themselves for the NBA. And it's hard to convince kids that the best way to play is to learn how to play within a system. And then it's going to make you better, because rarely do you go into the NBA and become a star, right? Out of the gate. There are a few guys, even one and dones, they go into the NBA. Look at Io. He's carved a role out with the Bulls. He's doing this. That's what they want. And you're going to have a few stars here and there, but generally speaking, you got to fill in a role especially when you start in the NBA. You got to learn how to do that in college, so you show you can do it in the NBA.
Defensively, anything come up? Because I go back to what I talked about earlier in the podcast, Chris Collins making the comment about how they just kept running the same play over and over because Illinois kept defending it the same way. Is there something that they need to switch up in a stretch like that? Or how do you handle that? Because I got to be honest, as a coach, if I think I can run the same play and it's going to work, just like you said, I'd rather win than lose. And I don't care if we run the same play 1,000 times.
Yeah, and I think that's where Collins has his guys. There aren't many egos on there. They understand what they're supposed to do. I think that was one of the bigger differences, because I don't know that Illinois ran many different actions than Northwestern did. It's not like they did anything. Northwestern just made some plays down the stretch. But think about how many times last year you said, why aren't they doing something different with Marcus Damask? They're just letting him post up and booty ball. There's switch, get a mismatch, go. Right? Illinois did the same thing. This is college basketball. It's become an NBA type game where you switch, you get the mismatch. So this is what Chris Collins did. Now, would I have done, do I think Brad did change a little bit? You saw the last, when they finally got the stop, the one stop they got in overtime. Yeah. Ivasic basically planted himself in the middle of the lane, and he waited and they got a missed shot, and they cracked down, and they left a guy open in the opposite corner. They were not, because here's the reality. Martinelli is not a great passer. He doesn't like to pass the ball. Usually if he's once he goes, it's going up. So I think that would have been something they probably should have done. But at the end of the day, they got to find a way to guard those guys. And if it means you put in Morez Johnson, put him on the ball. But the problem was they were going to switch. They were going to set screens until they got the matchup they wanted, right? That's the way Northwestern did last year with Boo Booey, right? We're going to run him around until he gets the matchup he wants, and then we'll let him go play. So I think that there are some things that are going to happen. This is college basketball is more like the NBA than it used to be. And so that's why you see these different things, these isolation plays. And ISOs are really hard to guard if you have a guy who's a good scorer in isolations.
Yeah, and I do. That's where I really like Morez is his weak side help. That if you've got a guy who can't pass, Morez can come across and help quite efficiently because he can get in the way. And if the guy isn't a good passer, then maybe that leads to something. Um, Another question for you. Let's switch subjects real quick. Everybody's talking the CFP today, and the big story is the SEC and Alabama fans who are just screaming. Now, usually their argument is win more games if you want to make it into the Final Four. Now that they didn't make it into the Final 12, it's because their schedule's too hard. But here's what I don't understand, Brad. You lose 3 games in the SEC, go 5-3 in the SEC. That means now that you're only going to schedule P4 teams in the non-conference game because you lost 3 in your conference. I'm confused, but boy, these SEC folks are very emphatic.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually thought Bama went 4-0 and their non-conference schedule wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. They
Played
played some decent teams. Played at Wisconsin, and then they played a team that won their conference. I can't remember who it was, like a lower level conference, but still. So it wasn't like god awful. I get what they're trying to say, but the problem is you got to win your conference games. You can't lose to the teams that are 5-5 in your conference or 5-6 overall and lose that game to them so they get bowl eligible. That's not the goal, right? And not only did you lose,
you got beat by 21 by the worst Oklahoma team in probably 25, 30 years. You got to go back to John Blake era.
Yeah, it's bad. And I don't know that Alabama deserved to be in the playoff. Now, here, if their argument is strength of schedule, but they're taking it the wrong way because they play the SEC. If the SEC wants them better, play 9 conference games like everybody else. That's what they should. All these teams should have to play 9 conference games. And I think that if you're going to even it out, so it evens out. So you're playing, every school is playing the same number of conference games. But is the ACC weak? It is weak. Does SMU deserve to be in over Alabama? I don't know. It could be. I can see both arguments. Alabama has better wins. SMU has fewer losses and better losses. I can see both arguments. It depends on how you do it. So I don't think you have anything to argue about. 12 teams are in this, though. You didn't make the top 12. Alabama has been in the top 4, 8 of the last 10 years, and they would have been in every one with 12. So look in the mirror. Get some stuff done. Don't blow games to Vanderbilt. I'm not begrudging these teams. Don't lose to a bad Oklahoma team. And you don't end up, you're in there. If they're 10-2, Alabama's in.
And look, we go back to Illinois. If Illinois had taken care of business with Minnesota, they would have been 10-2. I'm not saying they would have been in there, but they would have had to have been looked at. And they didn't take care of business. So you don't see the whole Big Ten deciding that Illinois didn't get in because they lost to Minnesota, so we're never going to play Kansas again.
Yeah, exactly. That makes no sense.
Well, okay.
That's basically what they're saying. That's basically what they were saying. It doesn't make sense.
Yes, and basically, Brad, look, you know what? Just because you drive by the church every day and the bells ring, it probably doesn't mean that Brad's driving by the church. Let's ring the bells. It probably means that it's noon.
Yeah, exactly. That's when I go by. All right. So, yeah, no, that's very true. And I don't get it. People are just mad. The SEC thinks they're the best football conference, and they may very well be. I think the Big Ten is the best football conference this year. Historically, it's been the SEC. Yeah. But I think right now, those top 3 Big Ten teams are legitimate. Penn State, Ohio State, and I know Ohio State lost to Michigan, but Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon are really good. I still think Ohio State's the most talented team in college football. And I feel bad for Oregon that they have to play them and it won't be neutral if they play them. Ohio State beats Tennessee at home. They won't be neutral necessarily in the Rose Bowl. Oregon might have a slight advantage, but it's not at home. And they got to play them again. They got to beat a team that is probably more talented than them, except maybe at a couple positions. But that's a tough draw in the first round of the playoff for a team that went 13-0, where Penn State, and I'm not picking on these other teams, but Penn State gets to play SMU and Boise State to get to the semifinals. Yeah.
And think about the angst in SEC land if the Big Ten teams lose and the SEC moves forward. This is going to be spectacular entertainment. I am so jacked up for this. that I think it's going to be fantastic. I like the idea. Marcus Freeman Googled Curt Cignetti and then went over what Curt Cignetti's did in his conference today. And now maybe Marcus has decided his team's so much better than Indiana, he can have a little fun. But I don't like giving a guy like Curt Cignetti bulletin board material.
You know why? Indiana's better than Northern Illinois. So I would definitely be a little scared there. But no, I think that's a great game. I was hoping that would be the matchup. Indiana, because Indiana, the state of Indiana battle. And then you look at that and you think, if I'm Georgia, would I rather play Texas again or would I play Notre Dame or Indiana? I'd rather play Notre Dame or Indiana. And then what's Texas? They've got to beat a Clemson team that wouldn't have had to make a 56-yard field goal to make the playoff. And then they got to beat Arizona State, who I think Arizona State's good.
They might be a scary team.
They're still scary, but still, Texas should beat them.
Yeah.
Would you rather play them or Oregon? I'd rather play them or Georgia.
Yeah, you've got to seed this thing next year. It's just got to be you rank the top 12 teams, because you cannot have Oregon got hosed, because that 8-9 game between Ohio State and Tennessee are two very, especially when they're clicking, those two might be top.
How would you like
teams.
to be Oregon? Hey, we just have to beat Ohio State, who might be the most talented team, Texas, who was ranked number 2 until this weekend, and Georgia, who's beat Texas twice. That's who we may have to play to win the national title. Man, that's a tough draw.
Yeah, they got it. They got to just, you know what? There's no I automatic bid for the conference champions. Yes.
Yeah, they should get
automatic
a bid.
Bye. No way.
No, I disagree with the bye, but they should get in. Clemson should make it in because they won the ACC. Regardless, I mean, that should be automatic. They wouldn't have made it in without the automatic bid, but do they? So I don't know. They didn't get a bye because they were the 5th team, but they're whatever. I think that's fair. I think that they should deserve a bye.
The other big news of the day is I think Illinois dodged a serious bullet with Alabama not going to come to play in the Citrus Bowl. They chose to get the matchup of a rematch of last year's game against Michigan. And now Illinois plays South Carolina. Not that South Carolina is a pushover, and they're hotter than heck right now. What are your thoughts about this Citrus Bowl for the Fighting Illini on December 31st at 2 p.m. Central?
They picked South Carolina because they're going to travel better than Bama fans, because Bama fans are looking at this going, we're not in the playoff? Well, why would we go to a game if we're not in the playoff? This is stupid. What is this, a bowl game? We haven't been to one of those in years. No, it's weird, right? But I do think, here's the other thing. I don't know that they would have played Bama's first string, because I bet 15 guys opt out of that bowl game. Anybody who's not coming back is opting out. Anybody who's going to the NFL is opting out of that bowl game from Alabama.
Well, Milroe's coming back, and that's what I just don't know that if they decided to run him, that would be scary.
They'd never tackle him. But I'm not. They've had trouble with running quarterbacks all year, so let's be honest. But no, I do too. So yeah, I don't know. It depends on who is going to play. But the one thing is, like, Illinois just has to compete with South Carolina, and I'll be happy with that. Don't get blown out.
Yeah.
Look like you belong, and it's a good performance, and that's what you ask for.
Yeah, and they get a chance to be in Orlando. Illinois has 17 players from Florida on the roster.
Oh, it's a great thing.
They have friends. Get as many friends there as you can, and see if you can help out from a recruiting standpoint, get a jump on next year. And I do the tailback that they got out of Florida, Weish. I think that guy is going to be
good player.
Yeah, he looks like he's going to be really good. So it's exciting to get down into the Florida area. Any other points that you want to jump on while we're on here before we close this out?
Yeah, Josh Whitman came out and talked. I don't know if you saw this, Mike, but he said that this $22 million revenue share, Illinois is going to jump in, and it's going to level the playing field. It is not. Let me say this. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it is not going to level the playing field. I don't care how many millions, because if Ohio State decides they're going to spend their $22 million, then, and let's say we know that based on Title IX, they're going to have to split it up somehow. You can't just all $22 million go to football. So let's say we throw $11 million. Illinois has $6 million like they're raising for Icon. That's $17 million. Let's say we throw it all to football. It still doesn't level the playing field. It's not even close. because Ohio State has donors who are going to throw in $20 million themselves without the revenue sharing. So it does not get a level playing field. It just means there's going to be more money there. Maybe it'll give Illinois a better chance against some of the other schools, but it's not going to level the playing field with Ohio State and Michigan and Texas and it's Georgia, etc. You get my point. It's not going to level the playing field with those
Look,
teams.
so here's how it works, because this is how life works. There's going to be $22 million cap, and you think that Alabama is going to go, I'd really like that guy from Chicago, but gosh darn it, we've spent our cap money. I guess Illinois will get him. And Ohio State's going to go, oh, you know what? We don't have enough money for that guy from St. Louis. I guess we'll let Missouri get him. So what is going to happen, unfortunately, is they're back. The bag men come back to college sports, and there's going to be NIL funds that'll be unaccounted for. The transparency won't quite be there, or it'll go back to just under the table stuff. We're back to the future. I have no idea how they think they're going to enforce anything. At
just
this
like
point,
they used to. They don't.
Yeah. At this point, you have 22 million. You say, okay, everybody's required. If you want to be in the Big Ten, the SEC, whatever, you have to spend a certain basement. And then beyond that, you know what? You just spend what you got, because there's no way you can stop it. It's going to happen anyway. And that's why Ohio State is Ohio State, because their boosters and their fan base do what's necessary to help their teams win. It's really not that hard. I'm just shocked that the NCAA is trying to set themselves up for yet another mess of embarrassing lawsuits. I think here's what I think the number one thing they can do is, now Ted Cruz, who's been all for trying to keep everything amateur, maybe they can get their antitrust exemption back. That's what I think the NCAA, which a year ago I would have said was insane. But now they've got that chance, and I think that's a better strategy. But again, I just don't know how you can police this right now. The genie's out of the bottle. If I gave you 40 feet of Crest toothpaste and I told you to get it back in the tube, how do you do that?
You do not.
Yes, and you don't get the NIL.
And how many times have I said this? Do you realize what a different world we would live in if they would have just paid players based on their jersey sales and their time spent, and just giving them basic money, so that they were cracking down if they had a $6 cheeseburger they didn't pay for, that kind of crap. That's where the NCAA is just stupid. I'll never forget. I think I've told this story before. Illinois had to write a check one time because they paid too much for meals when they were traveling, and so they had to have the players pay it back. So they had to have one guy on the team, and it's back in the D. Brown, Darren Williams era. They had to have one guy on the team write a check for everybody for an extra $6 a player or something like that. And none of them had the $6 with them because they're college kids. They don't have any money back then. And so they didn't have enough money. So they had to write a check for the NCAA, or we're going to let them play. We're going to make them forfeit the game or suspend guys and all this crap. It's stupid. NCAA deserves all the grief that they get.
I have a hard time arguing with that. So we're not going to make a point that's better than that. We're probably not going to make it. We probably haven't made any points. So we're just going to wrap it up at that. So folks, appreciate you listening to this. And please, when you're listening to this or you're watching this, share it on social media. That's how things grow. And we would greatly appreciate that. We will be back. Of course, we have coverage throughout the week for the Big Ten and for Illini sports. Keep going to IlliniGuys.com or BigSportsRadio.com, and you can get everything there. And you can find us on our IlliniGuys.com YouTube channel. Until next time, folks, keep moving forward.